Wow. Okay, you know what? Let's not waste time. Lightroom and Lightroom Classic, the new versions, just dropped. And I mean, look at the separation of this auto selection. Yeah. Now I know that's terrible. Why would I want to do that to the background? Why? I wouldn't. But okay, let's stop. Full stop. Full stop. Reset the images. Hey everyone, it's Gavin Seim. And the new version of Lightroom just dropped, and I don't usually get very excited because for honestly years, the versions of Lightroom have been kind of wah, 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 wah every time they came out. They're just minor improvements. Now this one, the big thing is the way the masks work. And finally, we have some mask tools that don't suck, okay? Because obviously, for certain things, nothing beats going into Photoshop. That's why you still see me doing videos going into Photoshop, manual edits, actions, things like that. Because a raw editor is different. But wow, what we're seeing today is big. It might be better masking control than we see in Capture One, which traditionally with layers and masking is ahead of Lightroom. But I'm going to show you, we're going to look at this. By the way, I'm going to be using Lightroom Classic. It's pretty much the same. I looked. It's pretty much the same in Lightroom. That is the mobile/web version. This is available in both of them. I'm not seeing any distinct differences. And by the way, check the comments because I'm going to be making a couple presets of today's edits to make this easier for you guys. I'm going to throw up some free presets so you can just quickly apply the AI controls that we're going to be looking at in Lightroom, and of course then tweak them to your heart's content. Obviously, I'll be playing more with these going forward in different of our preset collections and things like that. But this is good. This is progress, and I like it. Let's actually go over to Lightroom right now. Look, the new version, there's a list of things. There's some new presets, meh. The Lightroom built-in presets pretty much are not very good. There's some new crop tools. There's speed improvements. If those are for real, then yay. But the big feature is this new masking thing. I'm strictly going to focus on that because that's what you want to know how to use. And that's what's powerful. Okay, let's come in. I'm going to take like 4 or 5 images, and we're going to quickly go through, and I'm just going to show you guys how good this is. Let me get rid of me. I'm just going to show the screen for a moment. You should be able to hear me just fine without seeing my face because you don't really need to. Okay, so let's go in. I'm going to take these images as I would. These are all raw images at this point. And here's one on the coast. I'm going to go through and edit it like I would. So I'm going to go to natural HDR, and I'm going to say, hey, let's put contrasted HDR. Great, looks good. Okay, stop, full stop. That's the edit, right? Now, normally I would then come back in if I want to do some things. I could do some gradient masking. Yes, there's some Luminance masking and tools that we've had for years, but I haven't used them much because they're kind of kludgy, they're slow, they're clumsy. And all of that has been improved in the new masks panel. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to show you the new masks panel. It's right up here, and you can see they've updated this, so you can do brush, gradient, all this stuff, or you can just click here or press the K key, and it's going to open up the masks panel. You can see that we have none at this moment. Let me zoom back out here. Okay, so let's go to these free presets that I made, just so I can show you guys how these masks work. And we'll start with the triple AI mask. Here's the beauty of this, that it's been a real pain before. All of the masks, gradients, radials, all this stuff can be bunched into one group. So if I apply this preset right here, and of course we could apply manually, right? We could create a mask, select subject is the big new one. Okay, let's switch over here, select subject and select sky. Those are the big new ones, but I've noticed that everything has been improved. So if we go in here now and say select sky, and I click this, it's going to make a mask, and it's going to run AI, and you can see it's detecting sky, and boom, we have a mask of the sky. And I'm finding that the text subject and the text sky is really good, guys. And that's the big deal. Let's switch back over to screen. So you can see here, by default, it's showing me this red overlay, and I can see show overlay, or I can turn that off. Or what's nice is as soon as I start editing, the overlay goes away. Now look at this. Look at how cleanly we've selected that sky right down to the horizon. Now you got to be careful with a tool this powerful because it's easy to overcook an image. These selections are pretty tight. And I would like to see maybe a little more feather control on these Adobe, but wow. Okay, so this isn't bad. This is taken actually on my X100 and it's got good dynamic range. It looks good, but let's drop our exposure down just a touch. We're gonna bump our clarity down to soften it up a little bit, bring up our texture and bring up our saturation, drop our highlights. And we could even play with adding like a little bit of warmth or coolness to the sky. Look at what we can do. We can do crazy things with this sky because it is completely selected. Now, I'm gonna delete this because I wanna show you something else. And let's go to another image. Let's take a completely different image now. This is of these guys on the street juggling, these street performers, okay? It's a little bit underexposed. And so I can play with this to my heart's content. Now notice this new mask panel here, okay? Let's take the new mask panel, and rather than just these pins, you still see the pins representing your mask on the screen, but you also have a list of all your masks, and they're all in one place, whether it's a gradient, a radial, or a brush. They all show up here. You can select them, you can duplicate them, you can delete them. So I can just clear these out like this, and you can see here's my native image. Now, what are we going to do to edit this? First of all, again, I'm going to start with a base edit without a mask. So I'm going to go to silver. This was kind of a black and white vision on this. I'm going to find something like dynamic silver that looks good. And I'm going to do that and up my exposure just a little bit. Okay, now watch this. What I'm going to do is apply this preset that I made, these AI masks. And again, I'm going to put these in the comments for you guys. Let's do the triple AI mask. I click it. Now let's go to the mask panel over here. By the way, you can right click on here and you can undock the panel, or you can right click here again and dock the panel and put it here. So whatever you prefer, just right under the line there. Let's undock it for now. Normally I would leave it docked, but since we're featuring it right now, I want to make sure it's visible. So you see that preset I add? It just added a foreground preset. Look what we can do. It shows us a mask that we can then click and we can add to or subtract to it with a brush. So we can modify the mask and we can add or subtract a brush, a linear gradient. So we can basically tell it, hey, I'm going to apply something else to it, add and or subtract. We'll come back to that. I can turn it on or off. So here's a foreground mask that's just kind of darkening my foreground and keeping my intensity strong, right? And so I can go over here to the settings. Unfortunately, we still don't have all developed settings available in these mask layers. And that's a shame because it would be really cool to have the ability to use any developed setting in a layer, and I've wanted that for years. We still just have kind of the minimalized version of develop, but we can control all those settings right here. We can turn the mask on and off, we can delete the mask, we can adjust the mask, all of that, right? Here's the radial edge fade. So this is like a vignette, and you can see what I'm doing here. Now look at this one down here that says AI Sky, and I've marked it update. And this is really cool for me as someone who makes presets for you guys, because I can save all these in a preset, I can name them, and it's saving all of it. But obviously, if I run an AI effect on a person or a sky on my image, it needs to be updated for your image. And so it's actually telling you that. It still applies it, but the AI version, the AI part of it, is not running. You see the exclamation mark here. And if I click it, it shows black. And what's it say? It says I need to update this mask. Okay? So let me dock this. Click here. And you can see here, I like it here because it's all in one place. And you can see right here when I click on it, if it has an exclamation mark, it says sky needs to be recomputed. So I'm going to update this. And the settings on this mask are then going to pop in and boom, right here. Now, this preset applies a little blue to the sky. Let's go down to this because this is a black and white. I don't want blue in the sky. I'm going to click down here and take the blue out of the sky. And there we go. If it was color, it just would have made my sky look a little bit bluer. And now I'm darkening my sky. But there's another magical thing here. We have subject selection and sky selection. But what about everything else if we're going for more dynamic range? This is already a pretty contrasty image, but now I've got this deep, rich sky. What can I do with the rest? Watch this. I'm going to click here on the three dots and say duplicate AI sky. All right, now I'm going to click on it. Now I've doubled it and the sky's too dark. That's not what we're going. We're going to go to the mask inside of it and right click that and say invert. So this is an inversion of AI sky. And guess what happens? Now it's affecting everything but the sky. So now I'm just going to go the opposite direction. Instead of darkening, I'm just going to lighten a little bit and watch what happens. I'm just going to reverse this in the slider and turn it up. And I can control highlights, I can control shadows, and I can say, well, how much detail do I want? How much blacks do I want? And now I can bring some detail into the faces. I can control the texture, the haze, everything that I want to my heart's content in this image. I can bring it out. And look at the cleanness of these. I'm not affecting the sky. So now I have a sky mask, a background mask, AI foreground, let's call it, which I can update that. And I could save this then into its own preset to do all of these. And so for today, I just made some simple presets, and I'm going to show you the other one in a second. But wow, let's turn it off and turn it on. So it wasn't a bad edit before, right? It was a preset. It was a little manual processing. Looks good. But now I have total control. Let's take my sky, and I can just decide what I want to do with it. Let's make it dark, but then up the whites and up the contrast a little bit. So I have kind of this almost stormy sky, but let's not make it too dark. And let's just play with that just a little bit. I can up the clarity in this case because it's kind of a black and white, but also bring down the highlights a little bit over here on the left. I mean, look at what we're doing and the precision of these masks. Now I have a pretty powerful computer, but one of the things I'm noticing is this is working much smoother than the masks were. They've definitely redone the masking engine, not to mention put all this in here. So here's a really cool thing. Let's go to a portrait image, okay? So now we're gonna use a different image on this glamour portrait here. And I'm gonna go and just like the other one, I'm gonna do a basic process. We're looking at the raw image. So I'm gonna go to something like Power Workflow presets, and I'm just gonna use a nice, gentle effect like Super Portrait, okay? Just kind of softens the color and makes it nice. Okay, that's it for the preset. Except let's go down now to the gradient preset. On this one, I'm gonna use the portrait separation AI. And so I've made two presets for you guys to download, and of course you can make your own. This isn't super complicated. I like how intuitive they've made this. Watch what happens. I'm gonna open the mask panel, and you can see that we don't have anything here. I'm gonna add the portrait separation AI, and it puts two masks, but does nothing because both of these ones are AI masks, okay? So let's click on them, update the behind subject, which is gonna give us control sky, lightness, darkness, saturation, etc. And you can see it's doing its AI calculations to make its selection, and boom, we've applied. It's kind of like it just applied a brush setting as soon as I did the effect, as soon as it ran the AI, because the settings were already there. And then as soon as the AI masked it, it was like, okay, boom, we're putting it here where they told us to put it. And then of course we can go in and we can adjust it. Maybe I don't want the sky that dark. Maybe I want it brighter. Maybe I want to put more saturation and make it more blue. But now let's update our subject. So again, I'm going to click on that. You see the exclamation mark, clicking update. And it's detecting the subject. It's going to throw our mask. So here's the beauty. These are very additive. And I can do this, and there we go. Now we have our subject enhancing masks. The light's a little harsh on this sunset light. So we're smoothing the subject, we're enhancing that sunset light, and we have complete separate control over each. So now without any more masking, I can control the individual exposure, the black levels, the contrast of my subject, or I can control everything behind as well and get whatever look I want. Look at the stuff I can do. I mean, that's a little crazy, but you see what I'm getting at here. Wow. I mean, I am pretty excited. You can see I'm excited. I'm rarely this excited, guys, about a Lightroom update because Lightroom has been Lightroom for a long time. I've been using Lightroom since the original beta, and I've seen improvements along the way, but ever since Creative Cloud, I've not seen a lot of really big improvements, and this is pretty exciting. So yeah, let's just look at it. Here's what we started with, right? Harsh, applied a preset, applied an AI mask. Here's the beauty though, and let me just show you. Now you can overdo it, remember you can overdo it, but let me switch the screen, okay? So where did we start? We started here, ooh, pretty harsh. Here, smooth, nice, total control. But the other thing you can do that's really cool here is If I apply, say, the triple AI mask, which is probably going to be too much, that's the one that does the vignette, the foreground gradient, watch what happens. Unlike other presets, it's not overwriting, it's adding all these other masks to my list right here. So even if I'm saving to a preset, if I apply a preset with masks, it's adding it to the other mask. It's not overwriting the previous ones. Previously, just like a develop preset, if I adjust exposure and then I apply a preset that adjusts exposure, it doesn't add another layer, it just overwrites. That's how raw editing works. With these masks, and it was the same with masks in the past, if you had a preset that had a radial mask, it would overwrite the previous radial mask that you had. With these, you can add. So we can have a list of our favorite masks, AI or non-AI, and just be like, boop, boop, boop. And I'm going to be playing with that more in the future. I can tell you that right now. Let's go to another image and we'll see the same thing. Let's use that same portrait separation AI. But first, let's go to like Power Workflow and apply something like Magic, I don't know, like Magic Cream Portrait, and that looks pretty good. Now, let's go here, and let's apply Portrait Separation AI. Okay, again, we've got our masks. We have to click. We just have to update the subject and background, and it will apply our look. And what a great way to get dynamic range. I mean, this is what's really exciting. So there's our subject, and I'm actually going to turn the light down a little bit and the blacks down so we can bring a little contrast. Look at that right there. But let's not darken her too much. And let's just keep a little contrast in there and maybe put a little more saturation into this. Okay, now let's go to our subject, update. We're updating that subject mask. And now I can put some separation. Because remember, dynamic range and separation is about contrast. It's about differences between lights and darks. And by being able to quickly select this, obviously we can go like this and it looks unnatural. But a little bit of separation, it's almost equivalent to like burn and dodge. We can key for our background. We can turn down, for example, the saturation on the background so there's more emphasis on the subject. So here I'm darkening the background a little, turning down the saturation, and maybe I'll warm it up just a little. Now I'm going to our subject, okay, and I'm going to keep the saturation a little higher on the subject. Now I'm overdoing it. I admit I'm overdoing it a little bit on these, probably more than I would if I was publishing a portrait, just to show you guys these distinct separations. But what a great looking image. And of course, we still have all our global corrections too. So we can come down here and still edit everything outside in our normal develop settings, just like we were doing with the presets, and say, well, what do we want to do with shadows, highlights, blacks, etc.? What do we want to do with white balance? All that good stuff, right? So where did we start? Right here. Where did we end? Right here. Let me show you that again. Where did we start? Right here. And where did we end? This is something I talk about a lot with Photoshop editing, because as you build up, you get a more dramatic change more and more and more that oftentimes you don't even realize is happening. And that's one of the huge deals with being able to build up and do additive edits like this. And this is the first time I've seen this level of additive edits. Now, I don't want to be long. I'm going to wrap this up, but I want to show you guys one more on this portrait. I've showed you this portrait before. It's really nice, but we have some clipping here. Let's actually go to our masks and look one more time at some of these other ones. We still have the brush linear gradient, and it makes all these masks in the same place, like I've showed you. But we can also still do the color range, the luminance range, and all that. But they've improved this. So now if I go to the luminance range, you see my luminance range setting, and I'm going to start selecting. It automatically throws in this nice little overlay, kind of like we do in Lumist, right, with the Lumist map. And then if I Alt-click, I can feather it out. So I'm going to put it here, like 86. Then I'm going to Alt, should be Option on the Mac, to feather it. It's showing us the feather. So I'm going to feather. And I'm going to just put this right kind of on, feathered out a little bit on these highlight points throughout the image, okay? Now I can go down and do highlight. I can do white control, and I can try to do some recovery, because this up here on the umbrella is truly clipped. So I could even put a little bit of a golden overlay, for example, to do some additive light into it. Sometimes I find when I have something that needs to be recovered enough, it's just better to take it into Photoshop and brush it over. But I have a lot of control here, because using things like clarity, like dehaze, like saturation, I can take the highlight areas of all of this and just kind of bring some control to them so that they're not clipping as intensely. And I'm going to feather it out just a little bit more by dragging the feather, because you notice we're getting some hard spots on her face. Okay, so here we are. We've put this mask that's darkening down all our highlights, including her face, because I included that. If I only wanted to include the very upper ranges, I could drag this and include less in the mask. So you see I just have this nice, basically 0 to 255 or zone 0 to zone 10 range, and I can adjust whatever I want and put my mask in. And it really is actually helping a lot with those highlights. And I can tinker with white balance and all those kind of things to get the right look that I want for it. Okay, I think that covers it. I've kind of rushed through all this stuff, but I've kind of showed you sequentially 5 different images, how easily we can edit, add these masks, build up the masks. And obviously, I think I showed you this, but you can, of course, right-click your mask for your options. So you can rename, you can intersect the mask, you can duplicate, hide, delete all masks. All that is right there within the panel. So we finally have this mask slash, not exactly layers, but mask layers. And so far, just playing with it, I'm really impressed. This is something I'm actually going to use, unlike some of the other tools that we've seen updates in the past years where it's like, oh, this is kind of nice, but in practice, it's better just to go into Photoshop. These are really tools that we're going to be able to use in our everyday editing. That is the new masking in Lightroom for October 27th. So I believe this is Lightroom Web version 5 and Lightroom Classic version 11 is the versions. If you have Creative Cloud, you're going to see this in there. Obviously, this doesn't work on those of you that are still using legacy old versions. And I do continue to support like Lightroom 6. I know I got a lot of you older Lightroom users. I make presets still for those when I do preset packs and things like that. Check all those down in the comments if you want to know more, and download the free pack of these vignettes that I put together just to kind of be a great little utility to quickly apply some masks so you can jump right in and be using these. All right, you guys, take care, and we'll see you on the next one.